Hello, I would like to welcome you to my talk. The topic of my talk are the photographs of the collection Frege. The collection Frege is part of the estate of the scientific estate of the mathematician Heinrich Scholz, and it is kept in the University Library Münster in Germany. So Heinrich Scholz got into the possession of the original Nachlass from Frege in 1935. So that means Alfred Frege gave him Frege's scientific estate to work on it. And in the case of Alfred Frege's death, Scholz would be the new owner. And unfortunately, the original estate was destroyed probably during the sometime during the Second World War by a bombing raid. And nevertheless, these are the remainings in the collection Frege of Scholz's attempts to publish papers of Frege, posthumous things from the bequest and other already during the lifetime published work in 3 volumes. And part of this was also a collection of photographs, because Scholz was very much interested in photography, and he also was very interested to have photographs of famous logicians, pictures of photographs of famous logicians, and some of them were on his desk in his office. So let us start it now in more detail with the photographs we still have, and they still exist. And these are 5 types of photographs in Scholz's estate. So 4 of these 5 types are portraits of Frege, and the 5th one is a family portrait. So we give them different letters. So our photo A is the portrait of Frege middle-aged. It looks like this. We will then discuss this in detail. 2 copies still exist of it, very similar copies, nearly identical copies. Then we have now 3 portraits that are relatively similar, and as we will later see, it's quite likely that at least 2 of them are made during the same sitting, and the 3rd one is based on one of them. They show Frege as he was already older and had a white beard and white hair. But the head posture is different, so we have this named this photo B. Also, the portrait in where Frege has advanced age and a straight head posture. This looks like this, and we have 3 different copies from this in different sizes. So, and then photo C, again advanced age, but now a very unusual for portrait tilted head posture. We will talk about this in more detail, why this is important and interesting. And then the last one, we have 4 copies of this. So 2 pairs of very similar copies, but the 2 pairs are different. And we will talk in this talk only about the 2 older versions. Yeah. And then D is the portrait of Frege, which is where only 1 copy exists, and it's a very weirdly illuminated, also the worst from the illumination and from the quality point of view. And we will talk about this, why this has this bad quality and what is behind it. So these are the 4 portraits, and then is a family portrait of Gottlob Frege's family. And here are the 4 core members of the family. Here someone marked Frege, as he was, I think, between 10 and 15 years old. So This is his mother, his father, and his younger brother. We will also talk about this in more detail later. So let's start. So we have 2 copies of this. One is really in the collection, and the other one, surprisingly, is in the other part of the estate of Heinrich Scholz. So this is an historical investigation, so we want to find out more about the origin and history of these kind of photos. So we have these key questions. The first one is, which photos are the originals? Is this possible to tell? And I will have definite answer to this question, and I think there is convincing evidence. And if they are not, we will see that some of them are not. On which originals they are based. That's the first key question, and so to speak, a side question that belongs to the first question. And then an independent second question: when approximately were these photos made? So if they are copies, or so to speak, non-originals, then we will also ask where they were made and whether we have any idea when the originals were made. The third independent question is, who made the copies or the originals? Also, was this a professional photographer or some amateurs, and can we tell it? And then another issue, because they are now kept in Münster and were are part of this collection, how did they came to Münster? So let us start with answering these questions with respect to each of these photos, and then now we start certainly with photo A. Yeah. So the 2 copies. This is the size of the photos. Yeah. So about a cabinet size, between a cabinet size and a business card size. So this is the first copy. The second copy, very similar, nearly identical. Then what is really important is that they are both made printed on the same photographic paper. It's Aqua Provira. Then here are the 2 signatures, different signatures for this kind of photographs. And there's one important difference. The second copy on the right is in fact part of a picture frame that was bought by Heinrich Scholz. So for our dating and all this, the backsides are also important. So from the backsides one can see that they have this kind of stamps for which tell us which photo paper it was used. And from this we can then also estimate when they were made, or whether they are originals, as we will see. But the other curiosity is that we have the name, twice the name Ernst Schröder on the backside, and once it is erased, and then once it's still there. This is in the photo that was part of the frame. As you can see, it was so to speak adjusted to this frame, and in the second one we have then the correction to Gottlob Frege. So this is so there was the original owners of these photos were Scholz and his group. We will then see when they got it, as far as we can know, and then later the successor of Scholz was Hans Hermes, his pupil, and he then tried to finalize the project that Scholz started with respect to the publication of the scientific estate of Frege, and they were not sure anymore, because there was really after the Second World War and after Scholz's death, the whole collection was in a bad state and a bit chaotic, and it was difficult to find it. It was not anymore kept in Münster and so on. And so they were confused about whether this is really a photo of Frege, and they firstly thought, because they had also, well, there was not only an interest in Frege's scientific bequest, but the Münster group was also interested in Schröder's Nachlass and also possessed and lost Schröder's Nachlass, that it might be a photo of Frege, and it took until the early 1980s, where Christian Thiel then convincingly could establish that it is a picture of Frege. So the two Hermes groups, one that published the posthumous writings, and the second Hermes group that published the scientific correspondence, both were uncertain about the status of this picture. Therefore, we have this kind of things written, the two names written there on the one side. So the first question now is with respect to these photos, or these two copies, are they originals? And no, they are not. And as I already indicated, the production range of the photographic paper tells us that they can't be originals. And the second additional reason is that we can learn something about the purpose of the photographic paper, and it also speaks against an original. So the photographic paper, as we already said, is Aqua Provira, and it was first listed in 1929 in the Aqua catalog and was then produced from 1930 on until 1997. Frege died in 1925, so it's impossible that this is a copy that was made during the lifetime of Frege. It was made later, and not only that is a good reason for that, but also the third reason, that if one closely looks at the paper, the illumination is not perfect and the quality is not typical. And we will later then see, we found also an original portrait somewhere which was not part of the Münster collection. And if one compares this original photograph with these copies, that the most copies in Münster, one sees that they are copies of photos, because they are the illumination is worse, and also the details are not that good as the originals. And the second reason that was here also mentioned in the description is that the Aqua Provira was especially used for making photo enlargements. So we could assume from this that the original photo was a bit smaller, probably a bust, a business card size. Business card size. On which original is now are these copies now based? We do not exactly know, but there is a story. We can say a bit more about this. And there is a probable story we can tell, and it's an interesting one because there are traces that go back from Münster to Vienna, and from Vienna back to Jena. So what we found out, and what already Christian Thiel found out in the 1980s, is that in Vienna there is also a version of this kind of photograph, but it was really not identical, but very similar. Also, so to speak, it's the same photograph, but it's modified by a professional photographer. One sees it here with this kind of effect that is added, and we will later see there's a good reason why this was made here. It has to do with some details in the photograph. We will come to this later. And one finds here the biographical information. So it consists of a photo and another paper, and where they printed this kind of information on it, and then it's now kept in the Austrian National Library. And the homepage where you can find it now online also looks like this. Yeah, and there are two copies of this photograph that are kept in Vienna. Also two different prints of this, and the first copy has this kind of signature, and is part of the picture archive of the Austrian National Library. It's a framed heliogravure. Also a heliogravure is a special kind of photo that is made in a very special way, based on some kind of printing mechanism. And so to speak, you see here is the photo is a heliogravure, and then they added this other sheet, which is a Japanese paper. Yeah. So it's a compound object of two things. And then the interesting thing about this is for what reasons do they possess this kind of thing in Vienna? And so it was originally, before the Austrian National Library existed, part of the Fidei-Kommissionsbibliothek of the House of Habsburg-Lothringen. So they make collections about not only about Austria, of the larger Austrian Empire, but also about all the German-speaking world. And they collected, so to speak, information about everything that is important. And so they made also, they collected also portraits of important scientists and philosophers and so on. Unfortunately, it's unclear when it came became part of this kind of original collection in Vienna. The second copy was, so to speak, used in a publication. So there was, unfortunately, anonymously published, and it started from 1893 on. So there were different editions of this, and this kind of publication was a portrait gallery of the academic teaching staff of Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. So that was very natural also to include Frege here, with supplementary biographical text that was already we have seen, executed in the finest engraving style after original models. Yeah. And this engraving style is this heliogravure thing, yeah. And after original models, so it was based on original photographs, yeah. So, and this has a different signature, and we know from the library that there is a stamp on it, and it came into the possession of the Austrian National Library in 1920. And this copy was already found out. Also, Christian Thiel made investigations and found this kind of publication, this kind of version in his and reported this in his publication, but not the other copy. So now the next question 2 is when were the copies of A in Münster made? Also, we will then later see it here on the basis of the Vienna thing. We can trace back. We have a trace back to Jena that tells us then more who made this kind of photographs. But I will come to this in a minute. First, I want to ask when were the copies of A in Münster made? And I think we have evidence for this, but not conclusive evidence. So some hints that we also find in the collection based on letters that we find that were relevant, letters that talk about this kind of photographs. And there is a cautious answer that says it came to Münster between 1935 and 1937, and a more speculative answer, where we have also good reasons nevertheless for it, is in 1935. Yeah. And then, how did the original come to Münster? So one probable answer, also there are two answers. So one probable answer is that it was sent by Alfred Frege. We have also evidence for this, that there were photos sent by Alfred Frege. Another one we will see is that it was one of two copies that were kept in the University Library of Jena back then. Okay, so far so good. So we want to see what are the evidence. So do we have evidence when and from whom Scholz did receive the original copies? And we have correspondence in the collection Frege that provides some evidence. So the first evidence we have is really especially on our photograph A. So one can tell it from the context. So the context was the following of this letter. So Christian Thiel made already this. He was really interested already from the 1970s on in finding out whether this is a picture of our photo A is a picture of Frege or of Schröder. And then he contacted the former collaborator of Heinrich Scholz, namely Friedrich Bachmann, who was then a professor in mathematics in Kiel. And Friedrich Bachmann wrote him back and told him what he knows about this photo, because Thiel sent him a copy, and so it was clear that it was this kind of photo. Yeah, and then there was another letter sent by Friedrich Bachmann now to Albert Ferrat. Ferrat was one of the people in the 70s that were editing the correspondence of Frege. And in this kind of letter, he quotes from this letter he wrote to Thiel. And one finds this also in a publication of Christian Thiel from 1975, where he also quotes from this letter. So it must be around 1974. And Bachmann reports there, where Scholz got the picture from at that time, I no longer know. When I try to remember the old days, I think I can still hear the voice of my teacher Scholz saying that we have now also received a picture of our Frege from his younger years, and how he praised it with his characteristic emphasis. Yeah. Also this is, from this we also received, from this presupposition, we know that they have already received something before that, so they had already photos, and then they got also A. And probably because there aren't any others, maybe there were some pictures lost, but we know from other evidence there weren't so many photographs anymore left from Frege. So it might have been already photographs from the older Frege that they possessed. And they clearly knew it was a picture of Frege. And certainly it says from the younger years, this gives you also the clear indication that they had one from the older years. Yeah. So we can already infer this kind of evidence. So they had, before that, they had at least one photo from the older Frege, and then received also a photo from the younger Frege. And another important aspect here is at the time frame where Bachmann was working with Frege in Münster. Yeah, because they corroborated also sometime later. But Bachmann moved in 1935 from Münster to Marburg, where he then made his habilitation there. So he made his PhD with Scholz and then his habilitation somewhere else. And so the report suggests that they were both present at the same place, so it must have been in Münster. And so it can only be between 1931 and 1935 that they received this kind of photo. No? Do we know more about when Scholz got these photographs, other information? And we have two different letters that we found where we get two different sources of photographs. And we know also something that seems to be the evidence for the first finding. So the first photo that Scholz found out was not a photo that was in the possession of Alfred Frege. Because he started here in 1944 already his search for Frege's estate, and the first natural thing that he did was clearly contacting the University Library of Jena, and he asked them whether there is anything there in the library that is related to Gottlob Frege. And then they sent the director of the University Library Jena wrote a letter back, a 2 pages long letter, and he listed everything that was there. And the last point was then point 7, and he said then 2 photographs of Frege are there, one in business card size and the other in cabinet size, and they are both in the album of the Faculty of Philosophy. If you would like a reproduction, I would request that you contact the university office of the University of Jena. So we know that this was before, so he got it, so he then wrote back at the beginning of 1935 and asked for a copy, as we will see in a minute. But only in mid 1935 he was able to have contact to Alfred Frege. So he knew about this photo before he met Alfred Frege or had contact with him. And it's also quite likely that he had these photos before he contacted Alfred Frege or got any photos from Alfred Frege. Yeah? And then in this letter from Heinrich Scholz now to the university office a few months later, I have been informed by the director of the university library, says Heinrich Scholz, that 2 photographs of the Jena professor of mathematics, Gottlob Frege, who died in 1925, have been preserved in the album of the Faculty of Philosophy, one in visiting card size and the other in cabinet size. I kindly ask to let me know which one of the 2 is the better one and how much it would cost to acquire a good reproduction. So it might be he was more interested in a good reproduction than and he wanted to have the better one. So it was not really, that's a bit surprising why he didn't ask for copies for both of them. Maybe in the end he got copies for both of them, but at least from what we know from this kind of thing, he tried to get a single copy of a photograph in 1935, even before he contacted Alfred Frege. And hence he probably received the first photo of Frege in 1935 from Jena. And so because 1935 is also the year where Bachmann left, it must have been either it was one of the 2, and the first one maybe was the older one, and then they got this and then decided to get the other one, so they received later a second photo, or they received our photo from Alfred Frege as one of the first photos they got from him, because they had already this photo from the older Frege, and maybe they asked Alfred Frege for other photos. And unfortunately, we do not have all so that there was a lot of correspondence between Scholz and Frege, Alfred Frege, but there's only very little left, and this is from later, yeah, also a later letter where we have explicit evidence that Scholz got some photographs. And this must be some photographs that he didn't receive from Frege that was in his own possession. But because there was still, Frege moved from Jena, he had a house in Jena and then moved to Bad Kleinen. And some months before his death, they also tried, they also moved, or tried to move from Bad Kleinen to somewhere else, yeah, in Mecklenburg and Pasto, and then the remainings of Frege, of Gottlob Frege, so to speak, the whole estate that was left from Frege was still there in Mecklenburg, and so Alfred was really in the possession of this house still. And we can now see from this letter that he made, so to speak, a journey back and found photos there. So he wrote to Scholz at the beginning of 1937. Of course, I agree to any reproduction of the flu enclosed pictures. So he sent him only a few pictures he found there. Only a few were so we already knew from this other that Scholz had a special interest in photos of good quality, because probably he wanted to publish them as part of this 3-volumed edition of the works of Frege. Yeah? And I'm happy to hand over to you the small bust portrait of my adoptive father, as there are still several of them available. Other photographs, both individual and group photographs, are probably less suitable for our purpose, as some of them are quite poorly made. They have therefore remained in Mecklenburg. So it was clear that it was a later stage. Maybe he had already photos from Frege, which he kept. He lived during this time in Braunschweig. So, and then he moved once he had a journey to Mecklenburg and got other photographs. So it might be that he sent already 1 or 2 photographs before 1937 to Scholz and got others. And there's also some information that Scholz wanted to write a biography of Frege. So it might also be interesting for him to have the photographs from Frege from different times of his life. But because of the presence of Bachmann, which is important for what we know as he received this kind of photo, it can't be that our photo A was then only received in 1937. It must have been earlier. So in 1937 he received a few pictures of Frege and his family, probably also from Alfred Frege for reproduction, but Bachmann already left Münster to Marburg in 1935, so this doesn't help us for this purpose. And interestingly, what we really learn from this is that he possessed an original small bust portrait of Frege. So one can then ask, is this original still part of the collection now, or is it lost? And we will answer this later. And then there were other photos that were not good enough for publication, and therefore they remained in Mecklenburg. Yeah. So I think the most likely answer is then it's clearly that he received between 1935 and 1937 different photographs from different sources, from Jena and from Alfred Frege, but it's most likely that he received at least 2 different photos in 1935, and our photo was among them. So, and now we know how they came to Münster. Now it's the question of when approximately were the copies made. So we know we have a copy in Vienna, and this is difficult to estimate because they have very little information about this, about both copies there. So we can just say, because also in the biographical information it says that Frege was already a honorary professor, and he was promoted to a honorary professor in 1896. That this is the lower end, and then the upper bound is when the second copy became part of the National Library, also somewhere between. Maybe we can find out something more, but it's very difficult. We already tried. Concerning the original in Jena, we can say a bit more. So we know also who the photographer is, we will see in a minute. But we also knew, when one looks at the photo, it's also so that one sees that Frege was dressed for a special occasion. And in this time of period, and there were 3 important occasions. So it wasn't not so like today that one made photos on every occasion. So, and it was really, as we will know, it was not a photo that was made by some amateur. It was a professional photographer who made this. So it must have been a special occasion where this photo was made. And there, in this period that is relevant here, so middle-aged Frege, can only be 3 relevant dates. So 1879, as he was promoted to his first post as extraordinary professor. And then he was 31 there. Then 1887, his marriage. And 1869, where he was then promoted to honorary professor. Yeah. Also promotion to a new academic post or marriage are the best candidates we have where this photo might have been made. And there's also some other information in this letter from Bachmann to Verrat, where he quotes from this letter to Thiel. And he says that they were also asking themselves how old was Frege in the picture. I seem to remember how we then speculated about how old Frege was in the picture. That Scholz thought he was younger than me, namely a man in his early 30s. And then he said that one could see from this picture what the Frege of the Begriffsschrift looked like. So this was Frege. Also, Scholz had this idea 1879. Yeah. Which is not a bad guess, but if one closer, there's evidence against this, I think. So we have another photograph that is not part of the collection. Um, and it was Lothar Kreiser who succeeded in finding out this photo in Rostock, and he dated it around 1875. So it's obvious it was Frege as he was a young man, also so in his 20s, and that fits. Yeah, so it was Frege in his 20s, and one clearly sees that uh, Frege in his early 30s would have looked a bit different, probably. Yeah, as so to speak, it's really, there must be more than 10, or about 10 years between these kind of photographs, because also the face changed, and also the eyebrows, and a lot of things changed. So I think it's quite unlikely that there are only 4 years between these kind of photos. Yeah. So that means if Chrysler is right and the left photo is from about 1875, then it cannot be made in 1875, since Frege looks significantly older. So we can even estimate that he had then already some kind of, it was much darker here, and so very different. So this is more like from a man in his 40s or so, or early 30s, or late 30s, sorry. And so I think also from the suit here, it could be a wedding suit. So I would say 1887 is the most likely date. We do not know it exactly, but it's my guess that 1887 is the date where this photo was made. And then there is also something that might point in this direction. So there, one could ask why they made these retouchings here, and only on this side and not on the upper side, which is usual. So this rounded retouching, and there are good reasons for this, because one can see one thing is that he had something in his pocket, and one could see it on the photo, so it was not perfectly made. Normally one would, and then the photographer tried to retouch this and to hide this kind of thing. And the second thing is, one sees also that this buttonholes here are different, and the one is a bit worn out. Probably he had something in it for the wedding or so, yeah? Or it was he used it on other occasions for a watch chain. Might also be possible, but it also disappeared here. So this is the second retouching, the worn buttonhole here. So this, I think, also some indication that might be some sort of a passport or something like this that one uses during a wedding. Also, so I think that's quite likely. So we get a lot of other information of this kind of in Vienna thing. So firstly, we know who was the publisher, and that was the publisher that is here of this kind of portrait gallery collection from 1893 on. This is the company that made this kind of heliogravure, and here it's really the original photographer from Jena that made this original photo. Yeah. So who made the original photos? So we know in Vienna it was this company C.G. Röder who made these kind of printings, and we now know also concerning the copies in Münster that they make copies there. Probably they got it from either these were copies from Jena, or they got they lent the cop. They got the picture from as an early picture from Alfred Frege, which he possessed, and then they sent it back. And it's quite likely that Scholz made it himself, because he was very keen on photography and very interested in. Concerning the original, we know now it's this kind of photographer. It's Hoffotograf Friedrich Haag, who lived from 1831 to 1915, and he approximately worked in Jena from 1879 to 1915. So that also speaks more for something like. So it would be a surprise that it would have. So in any case, that will very much fits with what we said. It's 1887 is exactly in this time range. So, and here is just what we found out and bought and then scanned an example of a photograph from Heinrich Hack. That's the front side and the back side, also with this retouching here. And also this is also a photo of a wedding picture. So it might be specialized in wedding picture, or what it might be the good occasion. And here we have something in a flower in the buttonhole. So, and we certainly know that this was also made in the late 19th century. So this is all what we so far know with respect to the first photograph, and some of these hints we already had are then really relevant also for dating the other photographs, because these informations in these pictures are very important and interesting. This is the second one. One of these photos where Frege looks much older with gray hair, or white or gray hair, and a white and gray beard. So there are three different sizes of this. The smallest one it has a brown photo paper, and it has this size. It's a bit also similar to this kind of business card. It's a different kind of photo paper, not only with respect to the type, but also with respect to the company. It's Mimosa Carbon Brown. One can see it here, also the stamp. And it's the signature, it's part of the collection. The second one is the middle-sized, has a different photographic paper. It's now with, again, Aqua, and it's an Aqua photo postcard, and it's an enlargement of copy 1. Why they are enlargements and why they are copies of copies, we will later touch on. And this is not anymore part of the collection. It is now, as you, all signatures with A are the collection Frege, and all these others are part of the rest of the estate. So it was part of the rest of the estate of Heinrich Scholz. So the third copy is the largest one. It's now again Aqua Provera. We know it was made for enlargement, so no surprise that it's the largest one. And this is now again a part of the collection, and it's not anymore in a picture frame. That's also surprising, because one can see that it was once in a picture frame. And here is the comparison in size. So the smallest one, the middle one, and the largest one. Is photograph B the first copy? We will know the others are copies of this other one. We will say why in a minute. But it's mainly focus on this Mimosa Carbon Brown photo, which looked older a bit. But nevertheless, it's not an original. And again, it's the production range of the photographic paper that tells us why. It was a bit harder to find out more information. Also, it was easier to find out something about Aqua. It was harder to find out something on Mimosa Carbon Brown. I had to buy several old books on Mimosa Carbon Brown paper. So I bought a book from 1926 and one from 1933. And in the book from 1926, no Mimosa Carbon Brown paper is mentioned, so I assume from this that it didn't exist until then. But in 1933 it already existed, so we know it's the production range was between this kind two dates, and it was introduced, so to speak, sometime between these two kind of handbooks that describe all the photographic papers from this company. And if we also find then out one copy, an original of this photo still exists. Of our photo B, there is an original photo that is part of a photo album, a different photo album than the one that was already mentioned, not of the faculty, but of the whole university. And this looks similar, but it has a much better quality. And so we can from this tell that the others are only copies. Yeah. So this is it. This is the original photograph. One sees it's much more detailed, and also the coloring, especially the details with respect to the jackets, are much better, and also with respect to the face. Yeah. This is the only original portrait that is left. Yeah. from Frege, and they have it in Münster, in Jena, and I was already there also, but they do not show it anymore because this kind of photo album is really completely um, in a very problematic state. It fall apart. It's only the different sides they still have, and it's not in a very good state. So they have a scan of it, but they do not use it anymore or show it to anyone. So, and this is now business card size. So this is very much likely that they had another copy in this other album, which was also. So this is very likely that this was, although they do not have. It's another photo, as we will see, but it's quite likely, nevertheless, that there were two copies of this in Jena. As we will see in a minute. And also Christian Thiel in the 80s already found out, now already in the 70s, in his first publication about this, found out that this photo exists. This is the quote from, but he made this error with so this is a bit the 10th album, the University, there's no error. So this is really the same that he found back then. Maybe it was then in a better condition still as now. So, and now we can see really also here, so the details and also the illumination is really from a professional photo, and here one sees it here already from the illumination and from the details that they are just copies. This is very clear. When were these copies made of B? So it might, also it's quite likely that that our copy 1 is the basis of the others, and they got it from somewhere else, because in Münster Scholz only used aqua photo paper. So, and Mimosa Carbon Brown was mainly used in the eastern part. So it might be the one copy that they get from the University Jena library. And so it's in any case clear that, but also, so to speak, it might also be a photo from Mecklenburg, because it was also in the eastern part. So the cautious answer is between 1935 and 1937. So either they got this one, a version of this one, so not this kind of copy on this kind of paper they got from the University Library of Vienna in 1935, or it was part it was something that they got from Alfred Frege. But in this case, the question is, because it's not an original, it might be. Also, this is a bit weird, because it could be that it is this one, and because he said there are many copies left, but it's quite unlikely that he then especially made a copy in the 30s, although it's already an older photos from somewhere before that. So we'll get in this in more detail now. So, but I have a more speculative answer that says it was from 1935. And concerning the original in Jena, we have good reasons to assume that it's between 1902 and 1913. And that has to do with the relation of this photograph to another photograph. We'll get in this in a minute. So this seems to be of a photo from the same sitting of another photograph where we knew something more about the range, and it was made by the same kind of photographer. And the more speculative answer is it was made in 1908 on the occasion of the 315th anniversary of the University Jena, and coincidentally also might be another occasion in this year, the 60th birthday of Frege. So a very good year for making to going to a photographer and making a photograph on a special occasion. So who made the copies of the originals? Concerning the copies in Münster, it is quite likely, especially the later ones, that Scholz or Bachmann made them, so to speak. But the copy that they got from somewhere else on Mimosa Carbon Brown, that's a different issue. And concerning the originals in Jena, we know it's Emil Tesch, as we will see in a minute why we know this. Emil Tesch, another a famous photographer in Jena. He made also a very famous photo of Ernst Abbe, and he lived from 1860 to 1931. And it's difficult so far to date when he was working as a photographer in Jena, but the earliest photos I found was from 1905. And I also know from another source that it worked at least until 1920. This is, so to speak, some more information about where he, from his work in Jena, where he had this kind of Photoshop. And here we have also an example photograph. This is the one from 1905. There he was already still collaborating with someone else. And it was the oldest photo we found from him from Jena with this characteristic logo from Jena. So now, why we think they these kind of copies were made in the 30s, especially so at first this B copy that was probably not made by Scholz but by someone else, because it was on Mimosa Carbon Brown. Firstly, the photographic paper, as I already said, was produced in Dresden and mainly used in the eastern part of Germany. All other copies that really were made by the Scholz group or later groups were all made on aqua photo paper. Secondly, we know from this letter that Scholz asked for a reproduction of a copy of one of the photos in business card size or cabinet size, and it is a photo of business card size. Thirdly, it is certainly a copy and not identical with the original small bust portrait that Scholz received from Alfred Frege in 1937. So, we know that it's a copy, yeah, and we know he got an original, so it cannot be this one. So the most likely answer is then he received it from Jena. This is, so to speak, then Jena made this kind of copy for him. He asked for this copy and he got it, and then he made other copies of it for different purposes. So one he framed, and probably others he sent to other people and so on, because it was on a postcard. Yeah. So how did the first copy come to Münster? Most likely it is, as I already said, a copy made by the University office in Jena in 1935, sent to Scholz on his request, and they used this Eastern German photographic paper for this copy. And we know that he said, I kindly ask you to let me know which one of the two is the better one and how much it would cost to acquire a good reproduction. And we see, we also already know that they have, at least in another collection, or maybe in another collection, they had this kind of photo of Frege that was of very good quality. So why 1908? Why was this the original probably made in 98, and why Emil Tesch? So firstly, the photo is part of a series of between 2 and 3 photos, I think 2, but it might be 3, that were made by Emil Tesch during a single sitting. If we will see, then we can compare these 2 photos. We have a larger one, where it's not only a portrait, but there was a larger picture where Frege was sitting and reading something, or apparently reading something, and we can see he had the same haircut, it was the same age, and he wore even the same clothes. So this is quite likely that it was at the same sitting. And also from the type of the photograph, we know it must have been on a very special location. That was found out by Gretton McGuinness, already. So secondly, a copy of the largest photos of this series was possessed by Jourdain and Russell, and is confirmed by Jourdain that Tesch made this kind of photograph. So in a publication of this photo, Jourdain says that the original photographer was Tesch, and also Russell made a copy of it. Yeah. And then thirdly, Jourdain published a copy in a paper on Leibniz, on the bicentenary of Leibniz in 1916, and he here claims that he received this paper many years before the publication directly from Frege. And we already know that Tesch worked at least from 1905 on in Jena, not 6. And fourthly, because of Frege's clothing and the style of the photograph, it must have been made on the same special occasion. Yeah. And now we come to this photo. We have not the Jourdain copy, we don't have, but we were very lucky as we made our investigations. We contacted the Russell Archive at the McGill University, and then they said to us in October last year that they don't have any copies. And then luckily a few weeks later they contacted us again and said they now got it, and they possess now this original copy of Russell. And this is a special kind of photo. This is not a normal portrait. It's a special kind of thing that it depicts a professor who pretends to read something. Also it should present someone as educated man. Yeah, and this is the copy that Russell made based on the copy the original that Frege sent to Jourdain. And the original was clearly made by Emil Tesch, and one sees that that he is wearing really the same suit. This is the original of our version B, or a very similar version of this photo. And one sees he's then sitting in a different way, because here is this kind of difference here, and apart from this, the same kind of clothes he wears, and also the haircut is the same. So it's very likely that these two photos were made on the same occasion, and so we know this also was made by Emil Tesch. And why we now also think that it's made in 1908, so this was found out by Gretton Guinness in 1977, where he said the artificial pose, complete with a learning-looking volume which is not being read, is typical for the formal portraiture of professors made in connection with some university celebration. Frege's University Jena celebrated its 315th university in 1908, when Frege was in his late 50s. This would be a plausible estimate of his age in this undated photograph, for according to Carnap, he looked older than he was at the time. Yeah, I think this is basically right. Also, that fits very much, and additionally, one could also say he even had another reason to go to the photographer, but because of this kind of special formal portrait, it's more likely that it's the university celebration in 1908. So we really can date this photo very well. Yeah. On which original the first copy was based, I already said that it might be the photo in Jena, which might at first come to one mind, but we do not exactly know. And there are reasons that speak against this. That the photo that the original photo we now found in this collection, in this album, why it is not the basis of the copy with the Mimosa carbon brown paper that we found in Münster. The first problem is the first copy in Münster and the original are not identical. The button on the jacket is differently represented, and it's now larger in the copy And the illumination is also different. So if it would be the other way around, then it would be larger in the original. It would make sense, but it's as we can see here, the button is much larger in the copy. So it's about 2/3, and it's only half of the button here. And also the illumination is a bit different. Even if I change here the illumination, I do not get this kind of light effect. So it was, obviously there were different photos, very similar photos. So he made different copies. And so to speak, these are similar photos, very similar, but the one is not based on the other. And the second problem is that there once existed 2 different photo albums in Jena that contained the 2 photographs. So there was, this is our thing, the Fotoalbum Professoren und Dozenten der Universität. Also it's about the whole university. And they tried to get some pictures or photographs from all the professors from 1548 or 15. That was the unofficial beginning, and the official was 1558. And the second one was destroyed in the Second World War also. And this was then later also reported to Scholz. And the other photo album was called Fotoalbum der Philosophischen Fakultät. So it was just for the faculty, for the philosophical faculty. And so to speak, it doesn't exist anymore. So we do not know how the original then looked. But I think it's still quite likely that they are similar. So, also they were very similar, the 2 originals, and I think it's also quite likely that this copy is from Jena. This is, so to speak, the front side of this kind of photo album that still exists, and it's so from what we see, what is also I talked to someone there, and they had this idea that it was maybe quite likely that it was started on the occasion of this kind of anniversary also, and was then really filled until the 1970s. So, and this is the page, the context where the photo was can be found. So this is this original one, and here we find also some important information about Frege, where so his birth date, habilitation date, and death year, also the year of his birth, the years of his habilitation, and the year of his no, I think this is not the year of the habilitation. No, it will be the year where he became a Privatdozent, also where he became a member of the staff. Yeah. So this is now, we now turn to our third photograph. The third photograph is now this strangely tilted one. And there are 2 copies that are from the 30s and 2 copies that were later made. But we'll talk only about these earlier copies. So we now see that from the back side, it's also again was framed, and it still exists in a frame condition. So it's in a picture. It still exists in a picture frame that was bought by Heinrich Scholz. It has this kind of signature, and it has now another kind of photo paper, Aqua Lupex, but again from the company Aqua, and it's also slightly larger than the other one that we had so far. So this is the second copy, very similar, but it's not anymore. So we don't see this mark. So it was not part of a frame, and it is now. It's also not part of the. It was. I found it not in the collection, but in the rest of the estate. So is this an original? It's again the same game as it was before. The protraction range of the photographic paper says it can't be an original. And the main purpose of the photographic paper might also give a reason. And the quality again. So Aqua Lupex was made from 1927 on, and Frege died in 1925. So it can't be an original. and this was so the standard paper to just make copies for some negatives, yeah. And so it might be some photo that has at least the original size, where we could say in the case of this Aqua Provira, where Aqua Provira was used, that the size was also changed. And also the illumination is quite dark, and so it's quite likely that it was a copy. Yeah. And it's even darker than, for example, in this Russell, in this copy that Russell possessed of this other photograph. And we will see how these photos are related in a minute. When approximately were the copies of C made? It's again this answer because of the evidence we have from the letter between 1935 and 1937. The more speculative answer is 1937. Also, it might be that as we will see that they made we will soon see that they made a copy of a part of a larger picture. It's not so to speak a picture that reduplicates the original in the full size, but only part of it. And so it's quite likely that they got the original from somewhere, and then had to send it back. And so far what we know, it's most likely that it was in 1937, and it also is quite likely that it was, so to speak, some of the photos that Alfred Frege found in Mecklenburg. Yeah, so very likely that it was only a part of it, of a photo. And this is also the strange head posture, and this is so obvious. He has a very similar strange head posture than in this larger formal portrait, and so there must be an intimate relation between them. And before we go into these details of the relations between these photos, we will ask now who made the original version of C. And because it's so similar to this other one, we know again that it's Emil Tesch, and it was, so to speak, if it's at all an independent photo, it was also made at the same sitting. Now that was the 1905 to 1920. So we already know this from Emil Tesch. So for which purpose was this photo made? This might be an additional question. Especially the copy in Münster. And there's an interesting story. This can also be found in a letter from Bachmann, in this letter from Bachmann to Verrat, where he tells more about this background. He says above his desk, also I already mentioned it, that he had the same, also it was like in the case of Russell. Russell had above of his desk 4 photos, one of Cantor, one of Frege, one of Leibniz, and one of some other philosopher. And Scholz had a very similar habit. He said Bachmann says, above his desk in the Philosophische Seminar B at the University Münster. Also Philosophische Seminar B was the early name of this kind of institute where Scholz was. That was in the 30s. Scholz had assembled pictures of great logicians such as Leibniz, Bolzano, Peano, Russell, and Frege. Frege's aforementioned image of old age hung there. Also it's the old age one that hung there. Scholz saw in Frege's image of old age the long-suffering man had a certain delight in human tragedy, which always seemed a little melodramatic to him. So, and it's especially this kind of, because of this tilted head size, one sees this long-suffering man but the weird thing is, it's not because he was really suffering, because it was of this kind of posture, but Scholz interpreted it in this way. So it was because it was made on this special occasion, this former kind of photography for this university anniversary. But Scholz interpreted it in a different way, and so for him it was so interesting, and therefore it's quite likely that he made just a copy. He transformed it into a portrait, you know, to depict Frege as a long-suffering man. And it's also interesting, although Scholz was really obsessed with this kind of photo and with this posture, where one sees the long-suffering man, because he also published in the early 1940s a small article on Gottlob Frege in a very dubious journal. And we know that he then had, in 1941, he already possessed a lot of different photos from Frege, but he again used this kind of one. So, although he already possessed A and B, he used C. And up in a very strange, partially Germanic tribute to Frege, especially on the end, he praises Frege as a German thinker. And this is especially dubious because it's published in a Nazi journal, which is called Weltwach der Deutschen, Zeitung für das Deutschtum der Erde. Also so a very, yeah, right-wing journal, a very weird place for this. But again, it should show Frege as the long-suffering German thinker. So it's now we turn to the question. We know that it's a copy on which originally are the first two copies of C based that have made on Aqualupex. We do not know exactly, but there are two possible alternatives. So the one is the obvious one. It's a photo of a part of the large Tesch photo. The second, more caution one is it was part of this series. Yeah, there were different past photos made of this series. Yeah. And our photo B is one of them, and C is another one, and then the larger one would be a third one. But if one closer inspects it, as we will see, it's not so likely. Also, the alternative A is the much more likely one. And because it's not because it probably wasn't originally a portrait, so it's not so likely that it was part of the maybe. Also that depends. So we do not know what the photos looked like that were part of this original photo album that was destroyed in Jena, that was destroyed during the Second World War. But I think it's more plausible to assume that Alfred Frege found this kind of copy in Mecklenburg and then sent it to Scholz, and Scholz made a copy. I think that's more likely. It's less likely that that the people in Jena had it and they sent to Scholz only a copy of part of it. So this is much more unlikely. Yeah. Another option might be because he was in contact with Russell that he got the large one from Russell, borrowed it and sent it back. We do not know. Yeah. But there's already an interesting hypothesis that Gretton McGuinness made that I can now confirm with a photo proof. He had this idea that it's that picture C, our picture C, is part of this full, larger formal photograph made on the occasion of the university. It's not so clear what he means with part. Also, maybe whether it's cut out or whether he means that it is, so to speak, a photo of this part. Yeah? Also, I, so to speak, would like to make this hypothesis more precise and say that I think that Scholz himself made a copy of a part of this kind of Tesch photograph, and he got it either from Russell or from Alfred Frege and then sent it back. And because for his purposes he just wanted to have portraits of Frege for his planned for his planned biography on Frege or for his planned publication of Frege's work, it would much better suit. And because he thought that these kind of postures showed the long-suffering man, it was much better for his purposes. And he used it here already in 1941. So let us now have a look more closer look also on the large picture of the Tesch sitting. So as I already said, the Tesch photo was transferred to the Russell archive in October 20 last year, 2024. It was previously kept by the Bertrand Russell Peace Foundation. And this is the front side, this is the back side. So we already saw the front side. The front side is also interesting because there is a part of a letter that was, so to speak, put on the photo. And Wolfgang Kienzler asked the people from the Russell archive whether it looks like it's an original, and it seems to be cut out of original photo. Original letter that quite likely Russell himself received. So on the back side, this is also interesting. One finds the name Jordan there, and the combination, as I interpreted, 2/13. And it's not in Russell's handwriting, as I learned from Bernard Linsky. But I would say that someone else, or whoever wrote this on the occasion where Russell got it. Yeah, so to keep this information that he got it from Jordan, and then it would be in February 1913, which very much fits in this whole picture that Jordan published this in 1916. They were both in 1913 in Cambridge. It was obviously, as we see here, Cambridge, a Cambridge photographer who made this copy. So that might be the story. And an interesting back information we also know from someone who visited Russell in September 1916. And above the desk were two small framed portraits, one of Leibniz, the other of Frege. As I looked up at the portraits, Russell remarked in his characteristic manner, "I have these two Huns to keep me company." Yeah, and that was really during the First World War between Germany and England. He still kept the two Huns there, so it was part of these pictures that were above his desk. And now here comes the photo proof. Also I have here is I've used the original from the Russell archive, so to speak, cut out a part of it and then only slightly tilted. Also it's not the same kind of posture. One has to slightly tilt it, and then one can easily make, if one makes a photo of a photo. And then I have changed the color and illumination a bit, and one sees then it's very similar. Yeah, so it's very, very likely. I think this is a photo proof that shows that it's not an independent photograph, but it's a copy of a part of a photograph that Heinrich Scholz made on some occasion. And this is, so to speak, a photo proof for this Grattan-McGuinness hypothesis in the more specific reading that he's talking about a photo of a part of a photo. And against alternative 2, that it is an additional bust portrait also B seems to be really a proper portrait as one does it. If one makes a bust portrait, one has this kind of posture and one makes it as it is made, but C is quite unlikely for that. This tilted head doesn't make sense. So it only makes sense in this larger context. And as I already said, I think this is the convincing evidence also that it's not an independent. So there was only one, also Frege, it was very expensive to make this kind of photo. So I think it was really that there were only 2 photographs. He made one portrait that he used for several occasions, and then this larger for this university celebration. So now we come to the 4th portrait. So the 4th portrait is Frege again in advanced age, but it's really poorly exposed. So it's the worst from the quality. It's again aqua photo paper, but again a photo postcard, and it's the only copy. This is the size. That is the signature. And as I said already, aqua photo postcard. Is this photo an original? Naja, it's obviously from the quality it's not. Yeah, the illumination is a very good reason. And the good thing about this is we have already also the negative. Also in the other cases we don't have negatives anymore, but in this case the negative is also there, and the negative is on a. We can now say more about this is the negative. Yeah? And I've already proved it, as we had to make it into a positive, and it was really identical, and it has this other kind of signature. So I have confirmed it that they are identical, and the photographic paper itself does not allow a reasoning dating because it was produced between 1920s and 1960s, but the negative is based on, we can see it in the negative. It's not a part of this part, but so there are more photos in this negative. So it's not only this photo, but it's also a photo of piano and another version of a photo of Frege. So 3 photos are in there, and one can read on this other strip that it's ADOX KB17, and one can learn from the history about this kind of famous negative film that it was produced in 1950s. Yeah. So this copy was made to much later than the other ones, and probably it was a try to create a new photo. So I think it was made between 1950s and 1976, where then the correspondences were published, and the more speculative answers in the 1960s. We will say about this in a minute. And I have also good evidence, which I will show in a minute, that it's really only again a photo of a photo, and this time it's not a photo of C, but it's a photo of B. And why in the 1960s? So it makes, I think it was in the 1960s they started this. Also in 1947, after the World War, Heinrich Scholz tried to restart his project of publishing Frege's works in 3 volumes, and he made some sort of transcripts again from on the basis of the things that were still that still existed and were not destroyed. But it's not, there's no evidence that he and then it was not very successful, so he couldn't restart it successfully. So it's very unlikely that he then made big efforts to make new photos. But the real successful publication of the posthumous writing was then in the 1960s, and it's then, because the photo paper was from the 1950s, it's much, at least from the 1950s, it's more likely that this other group made this kind of photograph, and they were maybe thinking about whether they could, so to speak, maybe they used it to send it to other people to tell them more about whether this is a picture or photograph or Frege, or there we have also found some letter where they found out some relative of Frege that hadn't possessed a photo, and they sent it to him because it was on this postcard paper. But why do I think it's based on our portrait B? Yeah, I have also made another photo proof where I tried. We have this kind of photo B, D, also our version, and then I have made a slight modification of B. I tilted B a bit, yeah, and then I also found a coloring version of D. And then one sees, between these two photographs very similar, especially here, one sees there's something probably liquid tears. So here in his tear liquid in his eye, that is in both of them. So from the structure, it's very, very similar. And it's, so to speak, this is a modification, a tilted version of our photo B2. And so this is a coloring of that one. I think one sees it, they are so similar. I think it's a very, very clear evidence that it's not an original photo, but a photo based on another photo that was already a copy, of an original. Yeah. Who made then this kind of photo? I already said that Scholz tried to restart the edition in 1947, but it was not successful. And it didn't work on this anymore in the 1950s. There's no evidence for this. And so it's more plausible that in the very successful and flourishing edition that they made this kind of, in the first Hermes group that then published the posthumous writings, that they made this kind of a photo. So let us now turn to the final family portrait. And this family portrait has also some interesting secrets I will uncover now. So this is the original version here, where someone in handwriting wrote the names of all these people that were depicted, and someone else made this kind of crosses here beside the name of Gottlob Frege, and here in the photo above Gottlob Frege to identify him. As we will see, this is an original. This is the only original photo that is still in the collection of Frege, and it's very strange that someone really marked an original. Why didn't he make a copy and then mark the copy? So that what was not a very meaningful action. Yeah, and yeah, I already said that the marked person is Gottlob Frege, and then this is the signature. The photographic paper, there's no stamp on it. It must be a quite old one. It's unclear what's the type of photograph from which company. The second copy is a bit different. It's obviously a copy of it, and one tried to make it also to make this kind of cross disappear. One sees it very, if one closely looks, one sees it still, but it's not so well. It's not, one cannot see it that obviously anymore as in the original. And the second copy is really again made on aqua provira, which one uses to change the size. And it's not part of the collection Frege, it's part of the rest of the estate of Heinrich Scholz. And in this case, we can firmly say that it's an original. There are several things that speak for this. Also the photo paper is very much thicker and different in style, and it's I think it's very likely that it was from the 19th century. And also another thing that's the most important reason, that it was really modified in an interesting way by a professional photographer. And it was modified in a way that it makes it unlikely that one can do it in 20 or 50 years later. Because the photo was probably made in the 1860s, and then the modification must have been made on this occasion. And as another reason is that it was really an original family photograph because it has this strange kind of shape that is typical for these photo frames for family photos. Yeah. So it was cut off, the corners were cut off for this purpose. So, and the funny modification thing that I found out that nobody before found out was that the mother's head was pasted over. One can see it here quite clearly, and if one touches this original, one can really feel it. Yeah. So the mother's photo was, so to speak, pasted over. And the interesting thing about this, and it has also a different sharpness, as it's much better illuminated, much sharper. And if one knows it, one sees it then also, because this is the illumination is not so good. The sharpness is not so good. So we didn't so far find someone who could look behind this kind of modification. It's quite likely that either Frege's mother was not happy with the original version, or maybe even she closed the eyes, so therefore they had to make this kind of modification to save the photo. And especially it was quite early, then it would have been probably very expensive and also time consuming to make another photograph. Yeah, that's what I said, that there's this difference in brightness and illumination between. Also one can even if one doesn't have the original one, and if one carefully looks, one sees the difference. And the weird thing is about then that the effect one had, it has that the mother looks in this photo so much more intelligent and with a sharper sight than all the others. So this is a strange kind of effect that this kind of modification has. And it's also so because it's quite likely that the mother was really the important figure, because Frege had a very close and important connection with his mother during the whole as long as the mother lived. So when approximately was the original made? I think it was made between 1860s and 1862. That one can tell from the age of the person, especially of the children. And who made this photograph? So the good thing about this is there weren't many photographers at all, and during this time in Wismar, so they lived in Wismar, so it was quite likely that they made it in Wismar or somewhere near to Wismar. And as far as we could find out, there was only one semi part-time photographer, a guy called Johannes Kelk. They made photos in Wismar. So if they would have, so this is the most likely photographer. We cannot prove it, and one sees it also that it's a part-time thing, because it's a bit amateurishly made, because one sees they used some kind of curtain, but the curtain does not cover the whole wall behind it. So one sees parts of the wall still there, and the curtain is used to make this kind of background, but it was made in a very amateur way. So if one would do it today, one wouldn't show parts of the wall still, or at least cut it out or something, but here it's still there. So, and one has also not the feeling that it was made of a studio, of a real, so to speak, professional studio, but somewhere, for example, in some building, and it was just a made up stage for this. Yeah. Yeah, so very in general, it seems to be a very semi-professional setting. And the last question we want to answer is, who wrote the names on the back of the original? And the answer is Alfred Frege. I will prove it again on a comparison between the handwriting on the backside and material that we still have from the handwriting of Alfred Frege himself. And also, this is also most likely that it was sent in 1937, because this is quite likely that it was still in Mecklenburg, a family photograph, and it was sent by Alfred Frege to Scholz. But the only puzzling thing is because in the picture we know that he had only a small bust portrait that he sent him. Why they in Münster still possess the original? This is really puzzling, because what one sees, they made only reproductions. So this is still a riddle to solve, why they didn't send this original back. Maybe they got it later. So Alfred Frege died during the Second World War. He was a soldier and he died in the war. But it's unclear. Maybe they were not in contact anymore and they forgot to send it back or something like this. And now the last thing is, now we show why. So this is the handwriting on the back side, and the rest is, so to speak, the envelope and the only original letter from Alfred Frege to Heinrich Scholz that still exists. And we can compare. Also the most interesting thing is how Alfred Frege writes the E at the end of the name Frege. There is so a line down, and this is very a characteristic thing of a handwriting, and one can find it in both, in the letter and here. And the second thing is also how he writes the F. So this is a signature. The one writes it normally a bit different, but it's very similar here and there. And if one really goes into it, also the A's are similar and the D's are similar. And if one had a closer look, one could see that there are a lot of similarities, and it's very, very likely that this is the handwriting of Alfred Frege. And so probably he did this especially for Scholz, to write this kind, to write the names on it, that Scholz can have this kind of information. And then it's also quite likely that Scholz made this crosses on the front and the back side. Yeah, that was all we found out so far. Hopefully we will make some other discoveries soon, but this is something that I wanted to share with you. Thanks a lot for your attention.